Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all on behalf of the Madras Tax Bar. And today we have three young advocates from a bar, and Sindhuja joining us from USA, and Prithvi and Sai Prashant. All the three dynamic youngsters of a bar are going to handle this session on demands, recovery, and appeals under GST. And it's over to all three of you.
Thank you, Nitin.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So today we are going to have a conversation on the provisions of demand, recovery, and appeals under GST. So we'll be doing this a little different, more than just another PPT presentation. We thought we'd do it as a conversation between three friends who are discussing the provisions under GST. As we already know, we've already had a session on assessment under various laws in Madras Tax Bar, and that's set the platform for taking it forward by discussing the provisions on demand, recovery, and appeals. So now I welcome Sindhuja and Prithvi. Hi, guys.
Hi, Sai.
Hi, Sai. Hi, Sindhuja.
Hi, Prithvi.
Good morning, Sindhuja, I should say.
Thank you. Thank you.
So can we start off with the discussions on the provisions of demand?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, sure. So I suggest that we first discuss on demands. So I understand that the old law had section 73 and section 11A. So Sai, what does GST have right now for invoking a demand?
Right. So as like you rightly said, 11A under the Central Excise and 73 under the Finance Act dealt with the demand provisions under Central Excise and Service Tax respectively. Coming to GST, what we have is section 73 and 74. What they've done is, instead of having a single section for fraud cases and non-fraud cases, they've now split it into two. 73 deals with normal situations which does not involve fraud, and 74 deals with fraud, willful misstatement, suppression, etc. So broadly, what does it say? 73 and 74, under 73 and 74, any tax which is not paid, short paid, or erroneously refunded, and any ITC which is wrongly availed or wrongly utilized by reason of fraud or willful misstatement or suppression of facts to evade tax, which is section 74, or in other than those in section 74, which are normal cases under section 73. In those situations, the proper officer shall serve a notice on the person chargeable with the amount along with interest penalty as applicable. So as now we can see that section 73 and 74 deals with recovery of tax as well as ITC, which by itself is a small departure from the earlier laws where we had 11A or 73 for tax and rule 14 under the SEMAT credit rules for the purpose of recovery of credit. Now going forward, if we look at the provisions carefully, for the purposes of recovery of tax, the earlier law had taxes which are not levied and short levied also. But here, if you see, taxes not levied and short levied are conspicuously absent, and taxes only not paid and short paid are covered. What is the implication of this? We'll have to wait and see. According to me, there is no specific implication or repercussion which I can fortify. Another thing is, by reason of fraud or willful misstatement or suppression alone is covered. And under the earlier law, there was another ingredient called collusion, which again has been left out under the provisions of GST. Whether collusion can be covered under the gamut of fraud itself, or whether the department does not want to invoke 74's provision for the purpose of collusion is yet to be seen. Another thing which is missing is the wordings of intention to evade tax. Under the earlier laws, all of us are aware that 11A and 73 said intention to evade payment of duty is required for the purpose of invoking extended period. But here, if you see the provisions say fraud or willful misstatement or suppression of facts to evade. It does not say with an intention to evade. So therefore, is intention a relevant criteria at all, or whether the decisions under the earlier law which said that intention will have to be coupled along with suppression, fraud, etc., are those relevant in the present regime, is something which is to be seen. So this basically is the broad structure of 73 and 74 under the GST. Sindhuja.
Okay, that's great. So what about the time limits for issuance of show cause notice? I also understand that GST prescribes a time limit for passing the order. What about that?
Right. Yes. So yeah, the time limits are prescribed under the provisions of 73, 74, and 75. What though the provision says it distinguishes between normal cases and fraud cases. And the first time limit that is mentioned is a time limit for passing of the adjudicating order. It says for normal cases, it will have to be passed within 3 years from the date of the annual return. And in fraud cases, it will have to be passed within 5 years from the date of the annual return. And backworking, the time limit for show cause notice is said to be at least 3 months prior to the time limit for issuance of order for normal cases, and at least 6 months for the purposes of fraud cases. Now, a couple of interesting provisions which will have to be noted for the purposes of time limit. The first one is the provisions say if there is a stay for the service of show cause notice or an issuance of order by, say, a high court or another higher forum, the period of such stay shall be excluded while computing the above time limit. Another very important provision which section 7510 speaks about is if the adjudicating order is not passed within the time limit specified, that is either 3 years for normal cases or 5 years for fraud cases, then the proceedings are deemed to be concluded. This is a departure from the earlier law, where even while in the earlier law there were time limits prescribed, this particular deeming fiction was not there. This is the first time this is being introduced. Another important provision which also has a bearing on time limit is for the first time they've defined the term suppression. They've defined suppression to mean any non-declaration of facts or information which a taxable person is required to declare in his return, statement, report, or any other document furnished under this Act, or the rules made thereunder, or failure to furnish any information on being asked for in writing by the officer. So, our understanding of suppression ever since has been, I need to disclose something and that I have not done so. Whereas there were cases where the department tried to argue any kind of non-information will amount to suppression. And in those situations, the court had to step in. Say, for example, the Allahabad High Court in Triveni Engineering said that only when it is required to be disclosed and not disclosed will it amount to suppression. So that those judicial pronouncements have now been codified into the law itself, which is a welcome change. So these are the provisions on time limit.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Sai, thanks, Sai, for you gave a nice bird's eye view on section 73 and 74. I have a question. What if the assessee does not want to get into the long drawn process, but instead just wants to pay some amount and settle the dispute? What is your take on that? Right.
Yeah. So under the earlier law, also there were these provisions relating to voluntary payment and closure of proceedings, and that have now been carried forward into GST as well. So again, payment and closure of proceedings are being distinguished between normal cases and fraud cases. As regards, and also between 3 events, either before show cause or after show cause and after order. Seeing for the first instance, if it's before show cause notice, in normal cases, if both tax and interest are paid, the proceedings are deemed to be concluded and no show causes will be issued. And as regards fraud, on top of the tax and interest, a penalty will also have to be paid, which is of 15% of the total penalty involved. In cases where show cause has already been issued, which is the second scenario, and within 30 days, if an assessee pays the tax along with the interest, then in normal cases with under section 73, all proceedings will be deemed to be concluded and no penalty will also be imposed. In cases of fraud, which is under section 74, on top of the interest and the tax demand, another 25% of penalty will also have to be paid for the proceedings to be concluded. Now, what if a situation where an adjudicating authority's order has been passed? Then also an assessee can opt for closure of proceedings, but that such closure is available only for fraud cases and not for normal cases. In case of fraud, within 30 days of the adjudicating authority's order, any assessee can pay the tax along with interest, along with a 50% penalty for deeming the proceedings to be concluded. Now, under these closure of proceedings, 2 things become important. First, the deemed to be concluded, there's a specific explanation which says deemed to be concluded does not include prosecution proceedings under section 132. So this again is a small departure from the earlier law, where there were judicial pronouncements to say once the main proceeding is over, the prosecution proceedings will automatically lapse. Whereas here the law seems to codify the intention to say the contrary. And secondly, it also clarifies, this has also been a pronouncement, judicial pronouncement ever since in the earlier law, where it says, if proceedings against the main noticee are concluded, the proceedings against the co-noticee, for example, an employee of a company, are also deemed to be concluded. So these are the broad schematics on closure of proceedings.
That's very interesting, Sai. But I also understand that GST has specific rules for remand proceedings, which are very new. Can you speak about them?
Sure. Yes. So now coming to the provisions on remand, the provisions of 75 specifically state that where any order is required to be issued in pursuance of a remand direction, there is a time limit for doing so, which is 2 years from the date of communication of the direction. While it says that shall issue an order from 2 years, there is no provision which says what happens if an order is not passed within the time frame of 2 years. This becomes important because unlike the provisions which we saw for the 1 year time limit for adjudication, there was a specific implication given that the proceedings will be deemed to be concluded. But such a provision for remand proceedings are conspicuously absent. Another thing, all these are general provisions. It says the provisions say that an opportunity of hearing should be granted on a written request or where an adverse decision is contemplated against a person. Adjournments can be given, but subject to an upper limit of 3 adjournments. And this again is an important provision. It says the amount of tax, interest, and penalty shall not be in excess of the amount as specified in the show cause or on any grounds other than those mentioned in the show cause notice. This is basically what we call as an order beyond show cause, and the show cause as a foundation, etc. Now that has been codified into the law itself. Another provision which has been also carried forward from the old regime is if a show cause is issued under 74, that is invoking the extended period, is held to be unsustainable because of the charges of fraud, etc. were not established, then the tax payable by such person will be determined under section 73, which is normal period limitation. So these are the other miscellaneous provisions and provisions relating to remand under GST.
Now I hope at least that the remand circle will become non-existent. Anyways, moving on. Are there any equivalent provision to Section 11D of the Central Excise Act and Section 73A of the Finance Act under GST?
Right, yes. So 76 of the CGST Act is the equivalent provision for which is equal to 11D under the Central Excise and 73A of Finance Act. So these provisions talk about any amount which is collected representing tax but not paid to the government. The provisions say any amount which is collected representing tax but not paid to the government is to be paid even if the underlying supplies are not taxable. In such situations, what the provision enables is it enables for an issuance of a show cause notice. But what is to be noted is unlike provisions of 73 and 74, there is no specific time limit specified for issuance of show cause. So in these cases, under the earlier law also, the provision was very similar without any time limit. In one of the situations, the matter was taken up to the Gujarat High Court in the case of Inductotum, where the Honorable High Court held that I agree that there is no time limit, but it will still have to be done within a reasonable period. And what is reasonable will have to be determined based on the facts and circumstances of the case. So I'm guessing the same logic will also be applicable under the provisions of GST. The other provisions are personal hearing is to be granted only upon a specific request in writing by the SSC. This is again a stark departure from the earlier law, where the usually 11D proceedings are automatically given for a personal hearing. There seems to be a provision in the GST which says only on specific written request will a personal hearing be granted. It also specifies that such adjudicating authority should pass an order within 1 year from the date of the issue of the show cause. Then it also has a provision to say if proceedings are stayed by a higher court, then time spent before the higher fora to be excluded from the time limit. And the last two provisions are talking about appropriation and what happens if there's excess after the appropriation. The first provision says any amount paid to the government shall be adjusted against the tax payable on the said transaction. And if there is any excess which is there after such adjustment, it will either be credited to the Consumer Welfare Fund or refunded to the person who has borne the tax incident subject to the proving the test of unjust enrichment, etc. So this is the broad skeleton of section 76.
Nice. But it looks like there are going to be some legal issues which are going to continue. For example, did you read the recent decision of the Honorable Patna High Court relating to transitional credit? I'm sure there are more such issues which are going to crop up in the near future. What's your take on that?
Definitely. And it's already been 3 years since the GST law has been introduced, but I would still say it's in the nascent stages. So moving on to the issues, like you've said, we'll just deal with the Patna High Court first. What Patna High Court said was, it dealt with the situation as to whether Section 73, which is 73 or 74, which deals with the demands and recoveries, whether such a provision will be applicable for recovery of transition credit. The Patna High Court held that the provisions of 73 only speak about ITC wrongly availed, and transition of credit is not equal to availment. They interpreted the word availment to mean a positive act, and only when such a positive act is done for the purposes of availment, it can be recovered under the provisions of 73. Here they said transition credit is not equal to availment, and therefore Section 73 cannot be invoked. Is this correct? What will happen to this decision is yet to be seen. Now moving on, as we saw, 73 and 74 talk about time limits for registered persons say for example 3 years from the date of annual return, etc. But what happens if a registered person is not required to file the annual return? Say for example under Section 74, ISD, casual taxable person, non-resident taxable persons, etc. need not file for an annual return. In that cases, will it mean there is no time limit for issuance of notice or passing of an order? Or does it mean that no show cause can be issued against these people at all? Again, this is an issue which is yet to be noticed and probably resolved. And the next point is, like we saw, the explanation to 73 and 74 say that the deemed to be concluded proceedings do not include prosecution under Section 132. This again seems to be a small departure from the earlier law, which said any main proceedings are over, then the prosecution proceedings will come to a close. Again, the next one, like we saw, the intention to evade payment of tax, the intention provision is absent. Whether it is inherent in the provision or is no longer relevant will have to be seen. Then the Supreme Court decisions in the line of continental joint venture, are these all of any relevance in the present regime? Again, will have to be seen now. The next one, as we saw, is again collusion is no longer an ingredient for invoking extended period. Can the department say collusion is still covered by saying fraud plus cooperation is equal to collusion? Again, will have to be seen. Then the next one talks about Section 7513, which says if there is any penal proceeding initiated under say 74 or 73 involving equal penalty, then no other penalty can be imposed under the other provisions of the Act, say for example, non-registration, non-issuance of invoices, etc. This again was there in the earlier regime and has only been carried forward. The last point is important. Section 7511 says, if there is a proceeding which is pending for assessee A, which is held in favor of the assessee, and the department is on appeal against such a proceeding before the higher fora, then any time spent between the order which is against the department and the appeal which is pending before the higher forum will be excluded for the purposes of issuance of show cause notice and passing of order. This I feel can be a double-edged sword. One, to say that if this be the case, then if say for example in the matter is pending before High Court for 15 years, then in the 16th year they can come back and say now I will issue a show cause notice against assessee B. This I feel is something which can work against the assessee. And on the positive side, this will lead to reduction in multiplicity of proceedings where assessees A, B and C did not fight the same battle to the High Court and then win it together. If assessee A fights it and wins the matter, there ends the proceedings for all assessees. So these are the broad issues, Prithvi, which I feel can or has already arisen under the GST as of now. So,
thanks, dude. I mean, with the clarity in which you made us like take through the demand thing, it was really great. But yeah, it sounds very interesting. I think we should move on.
Right. All right. So that's basically the sum and substance of the demand provisions under the GST. Now, can we, Sindhuja, move on to the provisions under recovery?
Sure, Sai. Thank you very much. Before I begin my presentation and share what I've been taught, I would like to practice what I consider the most important lesson that has been taught to me, which is the virtue of gratitude. And at this juncture, I acknowledge Senior Counsel Mr. N. Venkatraman and all those who have guided me and put me where I am today. With these few words, I will first be discussing Section 78 and 79 of the CGST Act. Section 78 provides for initiation of recovery proceedings. The trigger period is 3 months from the date of order. And the department can recover it earlier than 3 months, provided they give reasons recorded in writing. This provision is new and was not there in the old law. Section 79 is something that we are already used to. Section 79 provides for different modes in which recovery can be made. It can be either by detaining the goods or by or through a garnishee order or by freezing your bank accounts or detaining your assets. These provisions, Section 79 is very similar to what was there in the erstwhile regime. Yet another provision that has been introduced in 2018 is the explanation to Section 79. This explanation provides that the word person includes a distinct person. While assessees who have different factories and units or units are treated different and should have different GST registrations for the purposes of the Act, for the purposes of Section 79, all these distinct persons are treated as one. The implication is that when there is a due that is recoverable under Section 79 from Unit 1, the same can be recovered from Unit 2. So this is a very new provision that has been introduced in GST. So moving on.
Right.
I would, yes.
Yeah,
Moving
so-
on, I would.
So,
Yeah, so I mean,
what
these-
happens to recovery? I'm sorry, Sai. You continue.
Yeah, so I was just asking Sindhuja, these provisions deal with what happens to recovery proceedings after the proceedings come to an end. What are there any provisions or mechanisms to do recovery when there is a pendency of a proceeding?
Yes. So Section 83 of CGST covers this. As you just stated, 78 and 79 are for initiating recovery after the demand proceedings are concluded, and in the event of non-payment by assessee, that is, an order has to be passed and 79 proceedings are initiated in pursuance of the order. But Section 63 gives the power to recover during the timeline of the proceedings, even when the appeal is pending. This can be done by the commissioner if he is of the opinion that it would protect the interest of the revenue, and the commissioner may attach the property of the assessee. But this order of attachment would be valid only for 1 year. So if he wants to continue to hold the property in attachment, then he has to pass an order every year. While there is no appeal mechanism to contest this order, we can always approach the writ court and get a relief, probably. Moving on, I would like to discuss a few issues under recovery. Now, there are two main issues that arise with regard to this provision of time period under the recovery provision. While Section 78 says that the power to recovery will start after 3 months. What if my right to file appeal has not yet exhausted after 3 months? Then what happens? For example, an appeal to the High Court can lie in 180 days. So does that mean that the department can initiate recovery proceedings immediately after 3 months when my right to appeal still is not exhausted? This is one issue that has to be determined according to the facts and circumstances of each case. The other issue that I find is the pre-deposit provisions, which will be discussed shortly, provides that as long as you make a pre-deposit, there is an automatic stay of the recovery of the rest of the demand. If that being the case, can an assessee simply make a pre-deposit payment and not file an appeal, and by virtue of that provision be stayed from the recovery of demand? All these questions have to be tested. This aside, there have been several cases that are filed on these recovery provisions, and the Honorable Madhya Pradesh High Court, in a very recent decision, decided the question as to whether a department can initiate recovery proceedings when no show cause has been issued. The Honorable Court had decided that as long as the assessee has declared his taxes in GSTR1, recovery proceedings can be initiated and no show cause needs to be issued. In a slight contrast, the Madras High Court, in the decision of V.N. Mehta and Company, decided that even if an assessee admits liability, then even though an assessee admits liability, without a show cause notice proceeding and conclusion of those proceedings, recovery cannot be initiated. There is a slight difference between the Madhya Pradesh High Court and the Madras High Court, which is in the Madras High Court, the admission of liability was by a statement which was recorded during a summons proceeding. The other major decision on recovery is the Karnataka High Court decision in LC Infra, which has also been followed in similar lines by the Jharkhand High Court, where they say that for recovery of interest under Section 50, the department cannot initiate recovery proceedings without the issuance of show cause notice, even though interest is something automatic and is attached to the tax. These are the issues that are being faced by the assessees and will have to be tested as time progresses.
Great, Sindhuja. It's quite nice that you're still updated with all these recent decisions sitting in the US. My question is, what will happen to the recovery proceedings when there is enhancement of dues or reduction in dues?
Yes, Prithvi. So this is also a very interesting provision under GST. Section 84 speaks about continuation and validation of certain recovery proceedings. So first, when there is an enhancement of dues, the commissioner should serve notice for that enhanced amount only. And on such notice, the proceedings will be continued from the stage where the proceedings were left off. Let me explain this with an example. A show cause notice has been issued under 73 for 120 rupees. Commissioner confirms the demand for 100 rupees. The department takes it on appeal. While the department takes it on appeal, recovery is being initiated for the 100 rupees. On appeal, if the 100 rupees becomes 120 rupees, then the commissioner should serve notice only for the 20 rupees, which is the enhanced demand. As far as the 100 rupees is concerned, the recovery proceeding already initiated will continue, and a new recovery proceeding will start only for those 20 rupees. Now, in case on appeal, the demand is reduced. In that case, the commissioner need not serve any notice, but he should still intimate the party and the officer handling the case, and the recovery will continue as progress, because the recovery initiated for 100 already includes the 80 rupees of the reduced.
Sounds very interesting. What happened? Is there any provision to pay the demand in installments?
Sure. That Section 80 provides for payment in installments. This is also a very unique provision under GST. First, this section will be attracted will not be attracted for any amount that is already self-declared in the GSTR return. this amount will only be attracted for dues that have been maybe initiated under section 73 or 74 and like cases. So how does this work? First, the taxable person or the assessee has to file an application before the commissioner seeking for extension of time. The commissioner can give a time period with which such payments can be made. It can be in various installments, but the maximum number of installments is 24, which for a period of 24 months. Interest has to be paid for such deferred payment, and there are a few other conditionalities also prescribed under section 100 under rule 158 of CGST rules. And the commissioner should also give in writing as to why he is giving a particular scheme. Now, if the assessee defaults in such installment payments, then the entire tax becomes due on the day the assessee defaults in payments. Even if there is an extended period that has been given for payment in installments, as when the assessee defaults a single payment, the entire tax becomes due on that particular day. I hope this answers your question, Prithvi.
Yes, Sindhuja, it does.
Yes. So now moving on. Section 77 and of the CGST Act and Section 19 of the IGST Act. This is a provision where the assessee or the taxpayer considers a transaction to be an intra-state supply, but the transaction becomes an interstate supply, or the assessee considers the transaction to be an interstate supply and it becomes an intrastate supply. Then what happens to the tax that is wrongly paid? For the purposes of this slide, I'm referring it as the wrong tax. The wrong tax that has been paid can be refunded by virtue of 77 and 19. And the right tax that ought to be paid can be paid without interest. This is a very fair provision, but the problem arises with the refund. While 77 and 19 give a right to claim the wrong tax that is paid as a refund, this refund is subject to section 54, where a time period is prescribed. If the determination of what the right transaction is determined after 2 years, then what happens to my right to that refund? This is a question that has to be answered, because section 54 explanation provides that relevant date is the date of payment of tax. If on year 1, day 1, I pay a wrong tax and a determination as to what the nature of my transaction is made after 2 years, then what happens to my right to refund? Whether it will be covered under the clause which says that 2 years from the date of decision of order, all these clauses have to be tested, but there is still ambiguity in that particular provision.
Right. Just to add on to the ambiguity that you've already expressed, since the 77 refund is routed through 54, there is also an additional burden on the assessees to prove the test of unjust enrichment. Say, for example, I paid IGST and I passed it on to my customer. Then I realized that CGST and SGST are payable. Agreed that 77 says you can take back the refund of IGST, but I would have already passed it on to my customer, and 54 says you have to satisfy the test of unjust enrichment. So we'll have to see how it pans out in the real world.
Yes, sure.
Just moving on, are there also any provisions relating to rectification of mistakes in GST?
Yes, so section 161 speaks about rectification of mistake. This is a provision which is very, very straightforward. So rectification can be done by the authority for all errors apparent, but there is a time period which is prescribed, which is 6 months from the date of order. The rectification can be suo moto, or it can be by an application from the assessee or other party concerned. If an application is made, that application has to be made within 3 months from the date of order. But one provision under 161 that is very attractive is that there is no time limit for clerical errors. So, uh, so what is to be understand from this is errors. The act seems to differentiate between errors apparent and clerical errors. So this should also be tested, and as proceedings start to come, we will realize if there is actually an apparent difference between errors apparent and clerical errors.
It's true.
Yes. Well, so all these provisions of demand are, and recovery, I would call them ancillary, in the sense that the bread and butter of us indirect tax practitioners is the appeal mechanism. And Prithvi, can you tell us where do we get from an order of an adjudicating authority, and how it proceeds from there?
Yes, sure, Sindhuja. But as you rightly stated in the beginning, even I would like to express my gratitude to my family members, uh, to all my seniors, and to all my well-wishers for always supporting me to do this, and for always motivating me to do something big in life. So, with that, I would like to move on with my discussion on appeals. Yes, Sindhuja, as rightly said by you, for all the tax practitioners like us, appeal is a bread and butter. Similarly, even under GST, there is an appeal mechanism under Chapter 18. So now, what is the first appeal? That is it is dealt in under Section 107, which is appeals before the appellate authority. Now, who can file an appeal before the appellate authority? An SSC can file an appeal before the appellate authority, as well as the department can also file the appeal before the appellate authority against the order of an adjudicating authority. So the time limit prescribed is 3 months for the SSC to file an appeal, and 6 months for the department to file an appeal, and with a condonable period of 1 month, 1 year, 1 month. Sorry, I'm sorry, 1 month for the delay can become condoned if sufficient cause is shown. So now, what are the basic ingredients of this appeal mechanism is that the personal hearing has to be granted mandatorily by the appellate authority. Then not more than 3 adjournments can be granted by the appellate authority, and that also, like, all the adjournments has to be specifically recorded. And if possible, the appellate authority must try to adjudicate the matter within 1 year. Then the orders which are passed by the appellate authority can either confirm the order of the adjudicating authority, modify the order, and like similar to the earlier regimes. So now, moving on to the next slide. The points, the relevant points to consider here are: that under Section 107 subclause 6, which talks about the mandatory pre-deposit. This is very interesting provision, as it states that the appeal cannot be filed. It starts with the word "no appeal shall be filed" if 100% of the admitted tax, interest, fine, fee, penalty is not paid. And in addition to the admitted tax paying, you have to pay 10% of the disputed tax, subject to a maximum of 25 crores. So this is a mandatory provision. But if you see the earlier regime, if you compare it with the earlier regimes, it never said that no appeal can be filed, but it starts with the word "no appeal shall be entertained." But the only difference here is, here they say that no appeal shall be filed. So this shows that if there is any appeal which has to be filed with a disputed where there is a dispute in tax, then you have to pay 10%, without which appeal cannot be filed, is what my understanding about this is. But of course, when the matter pertains only to levy of penalty or interest, the case will be different, because there is no question of disputed tax there. So in that, I don't think there will be any necessity to file a pre-deposit. I hope I'm clear to you guys on this.
Yes, yes.
Yes, Prithvi. So all these provisions are only for the appellate authority. What about the appellate tribunal?
Yes. But before moving on to the appellate tribunal, Sindhuja, there are a few other points here. Like for example, the appellate authority cannot remand. He does not have the power to remand the matter. Is what is my understanding of this. And all appeal from the adjudicating authority. This is also a very important point, because if anyone wants to file an appeal, let that be the order of the commissioner also, it has to be filed before the appellate authority. Unlike earlier regimes, here the provision clearly states that all appeals from the adjudicating authority will lie before the appellate authority. So that is one of the big differences in this appeal mechanism under GST. And before the appellate authority, there's no provision to file cross objections. So these are the basic concepts of the appellate authority under section 107. Now, Sindhuja, coming to your question, the appellate tribunal. The appellate tribunal is also similar to that of the earlier regimes. Like if you want to challenge the order of the appellate authority, you need to file the appeal before the tribunal within 3 months from the date of the order. And if there is any cross objections which you choose to file, you have to file it within 45 days from the date of the order of notice in the appeal. So coming to pre-deposit under appellate tribunal, here also there is a difference. You have to, with regard to admitted tax, you have to pay the 100% admitted tax, interest, fine, and all that, etc. Second is, in addition to that, you have to pay 20% of the remaining amount of tax in dispute. In addition to the amount which you have already paid before the appellate authority, that is 10%. So in all, you have to pay 30% of the total tax amount in dispute before the tribunal. So my view on this is that this provision has maybe overcome the decision laid by the Delhi High Court in the case of Shantani sales, where the High Court under the earlier regime had given its interpretation that when you're filing an appeal before the tribunal, where the mandatory pre-deposit is 10%, means you have to pay 2.5%. That is the balance amount which you have already balance of the disputed tax which you already paid before the first appellate authority. That is 7.5%. In addition to that, you have to pay 2.5% only as a pre-deposit. But in GST, the provision clearly reads that. In fact, I would like to read out that provision also for a better understanding and clarity. Section 112, subclause 8. It reads as, no appeal shall be filed under subsection 1 unless the appellant has paid A, that is the full 100% of the admitted tax and all. Coming to B, a sum equal to 20% of the remaining amount of tax in dispute, in addition, mark the words, in addition to the amount paid under subsection 6 of section 107 arising from the said order. So here the provision has clearly added this the word in addition to the 10% which you've already paid. Therefore, you cannot apply the Shantani sales principle and tell that you will pay only the balance of 10%, but you have to pay 20% more, is what my understanding about this is. So this is the basic idea of the appellate tribunal. And the other points relevant to appellate tribunal is, can we move on to the next slide, please? Yes. These are the basic provision mechanism, like the appellate tribunal can confirm, modify, or annul the decision of the order appeal against, may refer the case back to the original authority for a fresh adjudication or decision, take additional evidence. Even the appellate tribunal has the power to grant adjournment only thrice. That also, it was there in the earlier regimes also, but we don't know how this is going to work in future. We'll have to wait and see. Then it has the power to rectify its own order if there is a mistake apparent on the face of the record. and it has to mandatorily provide the opportunity of being heard. So this is my basic understanding of the appellate tribunal under the GST. So are you guys clear about this? Sai, Sindhuja?
Yes.
Yes, but when we speak about the appellate tribunal, the first thing that comes to my mind is its constitutionality, which was tested in the. I'm sorry.
Right. You're talking about the Madras High Court, right?
Yes.
The Revenue Bar Association case.
How can we forget about that? Yes.
Yeah.
So move on to the. The Revenue Bar Association had filed a writ petition challenging the constitutionality of this appellate of Section 119. So the main issues which were raised in that particular case was whether exclusion of advocates from being appointed as judicial member in GSTAT is violative of Article 14, number one. Number two, whether members of the Indian legal services can be appointed as judicial members. And number three, whether the tribunal can consist of more than of 2 technical members and 1 judicial members. So the court, while striking down this provision as unconstitutional, has recommended that the parliament should consider to amend the section and appoint and consider the appointment of advocates being appointed as judicial members. Number one. Number two, no member of the Indian legal service can be appointed as a judicial member. And number three, there cannot be more technical members than the judicial members in the tribunal. So this was the law laid down by the Madras High Court in Revenue Bar Association case. But till now, as far as I have seen, they have not notified any new tribunals or something. But then there has already also been an observation that when there is a new constitution of a tribunal, so the time limit will be calculated from the date when which the tribunals are being notified, and not from the date of the order. So these are the views of this particular of the constitutionality of the tribunal. So moving on. This is the basic idea about the appellate tribunal. Now we'll have to wait and watch how this functions, because it is not yet started to fully function still. So Sindhuja, I think till you come back to India, I don't know when will you come back, appellate tribunal should start functioning here also.
Hopefully soon, and hopefully the COVID situation will also subside fast.
Yes.
So now, what happens after the tribunal, Prithvi? What about provisions relating to High Court and Supreme Court? Are there any differences than what it was in the previous regime?
With regard to the appeal to the High Court and the Supreme Court, my view is that it is almost similar. But the existing questions of the earlier regime before on appeal to the High Court still remain same. The thing is that you have, if you want to challenge any order of the tribunal before the High Court, you have to file your appeal within 180 days from the date of the order, and then the bench should comprise of more than 1 judge to hear the matter, not less than 2 judges. And then the substantive question of law can be raised. The points for consideration here are similar, which will definitely be the future debatable issues also. That is, whether the High Court can allow the filing of appeal beyond the due date if sufficient cause is shown. Number two, whether no pre-deposit prescribed for filing an appeal before the High Court. Number three, what will constitute a substantive question of law, which is almost the issue in every CMAs which we come across. And then third, whether in a question of law can be mixed with mixed question of fact and law. So these are the points which will be relevant for GST as well. I'm pretty sure about that. And
Yes.
now moving on to the, I'm sorry, Sai, you were saying something?
Yeah, so these problems were there in the earlier regime also, right?
Yes. So that's what I'm saying. So these problems will still continue. Without this, our appeals will not become very interesting. These things always keep us on our foot. So
Looks
yeah,
like the problems have also been transitioned using the transition provisions under GST.
yes, absolutely.
Yes.
So moving on to the uh, next slide, that is the appeals to the Supreme Court. The appeals to the Supreme Court, the provisions are similar to the earlier regimes. So any order passed by the national bench or regional benches of the appellate tribunal can be challenged before the Supreme Court. And of course, like any judgment or order of the High Court in appeal can be challenged before the Supreme Court. And those appeals will be subject to the provisions of CPC. So these are the basic concepts of the appeals to Supreme Court. So, so, so therefore, in conclusion, I would like to state that these are the appeal mechanism prescribed under GST. But still, we are yet to look into a deeper picture, and I'm sure that as once the mechanism starts functioning properly on a routine manner, there will be new issues cropping out. And by next year, if we again have a discussion on that, there will be a lot of significant changes, and I'm pretty sure about that. So let us see how it goes ahead.
Yes.
Moving on, I just want to complete by saying what are the appeal which cannot be filed in certain cases. For example, can we move on to the next slide, please? Yes. So, for example, monetary limits. So, or regulating the filing of appeal or application by the officer of the central tax. Then, pursuant to orders or instructions or direction, if the officer has not filed an appeal or an application against a decision or order passed, it shall not prelude the officer from filing an appeal or application in any other case involving the same or similar issues. So these are the basic ideas. And moving on to the next slide, what are the non-appealable decisions and orders? So if there is any order of transfer from one officer to another, it cannot be that order cannot be appealed. Number two, if there is any seizure or retention of books of account, register, and other documents, these are also not subject to appeal. And any order sanctioning prosecution under this act are also not subject matters of appeal. And any order allowing the payment of demand by installments cannot be appealed against. So these are the non-appealable decisions and orders of the as listed under the GST. So this is the basic concept of appeal mechanism. So having dealt with demand, recovery, and appeal, I think we have covered a great extent of this act also. So what?
Yes,
Yes,
yes, Prithvi. So these non-appealable decisions and orders, we always have the writ court to approach to, and I think that would also be an option to challenge
yes,
the
absolutely.
decisions.
We cannot write off Article 226 just like that. Article
Yes,
226 is always in our veins. If there's any order which cannot be appealed, we always look to file a writ petition against that order.
to enforce
So yes,
our
that will definitely
associations.
be there. Yes.
Yes,
Sindhuja, yeah.
one another one another authority that is specifically constituted under GST is the revisional authority.
Yes,
This
I
was
was
not
just going
there.
to come to that. Yes,
Before
yes.
we move
Please,
on
Yes.
to the
please
provisional
take us
authority,
through that.
just Prithvi, you were mentioning about monetary limits in the earlier slide.
Yeah.
My understanding, if it's my understanding is correct, there's not been any notification which has prescribed the monetary limits till now, right?
Yes, I don't think so. There has been any notification till now prescribing. You're right, Sai. Even I have not come across any such notification on it right now. So, yes, Sindhuja, let us hear about revisional authority also.
Sure. So this revisional authority is something new under the GST. This was not there in the central excise or service tax regime, but a similar provision exists in the income tax regime. So the revisional authority has the power to call and examine any of the proceedings and modify, annul, or change the order that has been passed. When can this revisional authority do it? when it is prejudicial to the interest of revenue, or when the order is illegal or improper or has not taken into account certain material. When the revisional authority is doing that, the authority has to give opportunity of personal hearing, and that order is subject to appeal to the appellate tribunal and subsequently to the High Court and Supreme Court. Now, moving on to the next slide, there are certain areas where revisional authority cannot exercise the power if that order is subject to an appeal, or if the period of appeal for that order has not expired, or the order has already been taken up in revision by another revisional authority, then such orders cannot be revised again. The provision also prescribes a time limit of 3 years for passing this order, but there is a catch to it, which is the exclusion. When an issue which is related or which is related to the proceeding are pending before the appellate tribunal, then this time period of 3 years will not apply. The revisional authority can revise the order beyond the time period of 3 years. Similar is the case when there is a stay of proceedings, but stay of proceedings is completely different. But the previous provision that when a similar proceeding is pending, this actually enlarges or it widens the scope of revisional authority. And as Sai mentioned in the first slide, one of the first few slides, that section 75 allows for issuance of, from what we understand right now, section 75 allows for issuance of show cause notice, much later. We will have to wait and watch as to how the authorities are going to approach these provisions. With that, we come to a conclusion of our presentation, and we are now open to questions.
Thank you so much, Sindhuja, for all your efforts, like managing the time gap also from US and here, and Sai also. I mean, we made a very good conversation today instead of simply sitting and just whiling away time. I think this was a very productive session for the three of us especially. And I thank all the seniors who have given us this opportunity to take this session, and for all of us, for all the participants to join us today. Sai, your words, Sai.
Yeah, this was, like you said, Prithvi, this was an extremely productive session. All of us got to feed off each other's knowledge, and now we've been enriched on all the provisions relating to demand recovery and appeals under the GST law. While most of us have been practicing GST, these provisions are yet to be properly beaten to the pulp because the appellate mechanisms haven't started in their full flow. So this is an extremely good opportunity for us to sit and examine, and also probably use this as one of the opportunities to enrich each other. And with that, I would also like to thank everybody for this opportunity, for speaking on this forum, and all the seniors who have assisted me all through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sai. Sai, you can close the slides.
Yeah, thank you. It was a very useful and interesting session. You have taken us through the provisions of demand recovery and appeals in a very different manner, in a creative way, and it was very interesting. And so it's now time to take up the question answer session. So I have already seen there are lots of hands being raised, and before I thank Lordship Sivanyanam J for joining this session. And now moving on with the question answer sessions. First, I'm unmuting Krishnanand sir.
Before we move on, I would like to thank Lordship Justice Sivanyanam for joining in the session and encouraging us today. Thank you very much, my lords, for joining this session.
Yes, sir. Krishnanand sir. Yeah.
Thank you for unmuting me. Good evening, my lordship. I have a question to all the panelists. As on date, there is no appellate tribunal because of the striking down of 2 sections by the Madras High Court. Now, the only option available to you against an order of a commissioner or that of a commissioner appeals is to go to the writ court. Now, what
happens?
happens as far as the pre-deposit amount is concerned?
Yes, sir. Krishnanand sir. Yeah.
What happens as far as the pre-deposit amount is concerned?
Yeah.
What happens as far as the pre-deposit amount is concerned? And when is the tribunal likely to be formed? Until then, what is going to be the procedure that is going to be adopted?
Sir, can I answer that question?
Please.
Yes, sir. Sir, as we stated, sir, if there is no appellate mechanism in place, then the only remedy lies before us is to go before the writ court. And when the question of pre-deposit comes, then the question of pre-deposit will not arise because we are not filing an appeal under section 112. So my thinking about my idea about that is that the pre-deposit will not lie for now when you're filing a writ petition. Then and as I stated earlier in my session also, sir, we don't know when the tribunal will be constituted. That's what I told. Like after a year, when we come back, if tribunal is constituted, there will be more issues to talk on, and we will know exact mechanism of how it helps. That is my view, sir. If there is any other, we would be definitely grateful to anyone who wants to substantiate on this.
Yeah.
So I want to say
In a
that-
lighter vein, in a lighter vein, don't you think the way the things stand now without the tribunal, the SSCC will be happy because they don't have to pay any money as pre-deposit at all, just by
It
filing
looks
a
like that.
petition?
But it looks like that. But once it is notified, then I think all these writ petitions will become infructuous, sir. Then they will have to pay.
Thank you very much.
Just to add on to what Prithvi said, sir, there was a circular or a notification issued subsequently where they said that the time limit for filing an appeal to the tribunal will only be from the date of constitution of the tribunal and not from the date of the order. So
Correct.
because that we can also avoid filing the writ petition to the High Court and increasing the burden there, and wait for the GSTAT to be constituted sometime during the future.
My reply to you, Sai Prashant,
Yes.
is that as an entrepreneur, having a big kind of demand lying against him will not sit idle with the demand for years to come till the tribunal is formed. So he would like to have some permanency in as far as the demand is concerned. And obviously he's going to move the High Court and not keep quiet, waiting for the tribunal to be formed, because we do not know when the tribunal is going to be formed.
Correct.
Thank you, Krishnanan sir. Now I'm unmuting Natarajan sir.
Yeah, very good evening to all of you. And first of all, hearty congrats to all the three young participants who for the first time have brought up this format. Actually, I'm not, I don't want to ask any questions to them. I just want to share a point which has come from out of their discussion. If you have noticed the provisions, there were two provisions which they have mentioned today. Earlier, the time limit was for issue of show cause notice. So earlier it was for before such date, you have to issue the show cause notice, and there is no time limit for adjudication. Now they have fixed the time limit for adjudication, and the notice has to be issued within 3 months in case of normal, and within 6 months if it is a suppression case. So this move, what I find, it is to justify the delay on the part of the department. They can wait till up to the end of the period and just before 3 months issue a notice, and we will be compelled to give our reply. In many cases, wherever the fraud and suppression are involved, there will be a lot of relied upon documents, everything, but we will be compelled to give the reply within that particular time. So this looks a little unfair. The time limit method should have been retained in the earlier manner. So this is one serious issue which we have to think about and try to do something. And secondly, if you see that the exclusion of time limit wherever any similar appeal is pending, that is also new. It was not there under the old law. Again, that will also promote uncertainty. We don't know the same issue, whether it is pending somewhere in Guwahati or Chandigarh or somewhere, but somewhere if the department is able to pick up that a similar case is pending somewhere, then the issue will be consigned to the call book and no orders will be passed. So this also will create a lot of uncertainties. Earlier it was, whatever appeals are pending, the officers can pass their orders. By following the existing judgments, they will pass the orders. And anybody who is aggrieved by that order, they will file the appeal. That was the position which was very certain. Now this also adds more to the certainty. So these are all certain points which we have to think over and try to take it up. Just I wanted to share this, and thank you. And once again, congratulations to all of you guys.
Thank you, sir.
Sir Natarajan, sir, I want to supplement your view. I am of the view that Earlier, the time to the department was up to 5 years to issue the show cause notice. Now it has been reduced. So you are seeing
No.
in the other way.
No, sir, it has not
Yes,
been
up to
reduced.
5 years, even on the last day, a show cause notice can be issued. Now, because of fixing yes, the time is reduced. So the department has to worry, not the assessee.
Well, but again, the
Okay,
calculation. Anyway, I take that.
yes. So now the time is reduced so far as the department is concerned. And overall, it's an excellent presentation by all the youngsters today. And to attorney Mrs. Sindhuja Krishnan, I have one question to you. So here also you see to recover the ITC wrongly availed. Still the section uses the word availed or utilized. You will not come and argue that it should be utilized. Then, okay. So now I think for 1 year you are in US, I think so, Sindhuja. So did you have any chance or idea to compare our system of sales tax law with reference to US sales tax law? Did you have any chance?
Yes, sir, definitely. One major or stark difference between the US regime and the Indian regime is that in India, the direct tax law and the indirect tax law have equal weightage. But in US, the entire system is directed towards a direct tax law regime. There are indirect tax laws, but they are very, very localized. And in US, yes, it is very localized, and also the court mechanism, etc. for those local taxes are very, very state specific. So there is no central indirect tax regime in US. And everything is through a direct tax regime. And even businesses, all benefits and all tax credit, everything is planned only according to the federal income, which is the central income, which is of the central income of the corporates. So tax planning, etc., all these decisions are made only under a direct tax. This is the stark difference that I saw. And also the concept of entities are slightly different from India and in US. That also helps them. For example, here partnership tax is very sought after, because here partnerships are considered as an offshoot of the individual persons, and they are not considered as a separate entity for tax purposes. So this also helps them to modify and structure the tax transactions. So these are the stark differences that I found.
Very good. Still more days to ahead. You will compare all the provisions, I hope so. And we look forward to see you again. And thank you all the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Natarajan sir, for the question, and APS sir for supplementing the answer to it. Now, JK sir has a question. Jay Kumar sir, I have unmuted you, sir.
Yeah, again,
Nitin, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, after JK sir finishes, I think Sundareswaran sir also had some points to supplement on the earlier questions.
Then I will mute myself, let that be finished, because that will...
Okay, okay sir, I'll unmute Sundareswaran sir. I'll unmute Sundareswaran.
Yes, please go ahead with that. I'll wait.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
See,
sir.
I heard saying that under the GST, there is a provision which excludes the time limit if the case is pending before some other forum, Supreme Court or High Court. Similarly, we had in erstwhile Tamil Nadu General Sales Tax Act. My opinion is it can only be the particular person. Say, for example, an assessee has filed an appeal. He succeeded in lower forum, say High Court, and matter is pending in Supreme Court. The limitation should apply only for that particular person to exclude the other assessment. It cannot apply in person in REM. The limitation cannot be applied in REM. It can only be applied in persona. Number one. Then there is also some speciality in GST with regard to regional bench and special bench. Classification, interstate, intrastate, like what we had in classification under the erstwhile excise special bench, where earlier in Delhi, and thereafter it was given to all the benches here. In GST also there is a difference between intrastate, interstate. There is some difference and speciality under the GST with regard to special bench and regional bench. That has to be explained. That's all.
sir, two very valid points, sir. We actually discussed this concept of whether the time limit will be excluded only for the proceedings pertaining to that SSC or any other SSC.
Yes,
But from what we, from the wordings of the provision, we were still not confident whether it was wide enough to cover all proceedings or it would refer only to proceedings of that particular SSC. And we wanted to keep the question open, and we were open to discussions. That was one point, sir. The other one is we also had a slide on the different types of tribunals, but since the tribunal had not yet been constituted, we thought we can avoid it and also to accommodate the time. And
Anyway,
that
it
is
was,
why
it was very nice. It
could
was
not
very
do it.
interesting and very informative also. Great.
Thank you, sir.
That's all.
So just to add
Thank
on
you,
to
sir.
what Pooja just said, the provision says some other proceedings are pending. So the some other proceedings can be interpreted for some other proceedings of the same SSC or some other proceedings of any SSC. So that is the open-ended question that we are posing now as to whether how to interpret the some other proceeding. If TNGST's logic is to be adopted, then it will be restricted to the same SSC.
No, it will be applied to everybody. Courts have said that it applies universal. It can't be. It is erroneous and it is arbitrary also. It can't be like that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sundareswaran sir, for the two important questions. Now over to JK sir. Jaykumar.
Thank you. Like Natarajan, I am also not going to ask. I am only going to get clarified. First, my thanks to all the trio. Wonderful, yeah, I have to tell you, because of this tribunal has been struck down, we have never opened these provisions at all. We have never crossed whatever is relevant up to Commissioner Appeals only. It was only because of you today I opened and I read it, and I was, after Prithvi saying that provision in which I have my doubt, I wanted to ask you, it was really jarring. My question would be to Prithvi, and I want to also say congratulate Sindhuja for taking your time and remembering. It is nostalgia. Welcome, and it was very nice of you, taking time to prepare and present. And
Thank you, sir.
we understand that you have become part American because in your slide, the recovery, it was dollars and not rupees. It was nice. Anyway, coming back. Sai Prashant, you are fantastic, fabulous. And keep it up. And Prithvi, coming back to you. My question to you. You opened up a new floodgate in 112.8. You said in tribunal I have to pay over and above the 10% what I have paid to the Commissioner of Appeals. I have to pay 20% of the whatever tax, what is determined by the Commissioner of Appeals. Am I right? Is this
Absolutely, sir.
okay? We'll put it in numbers and we'll go ahead with that.
Yes.
There was a first appeal. There was a appeal for 100 rupees. I am going before the Commissioner of Appeals.
Yes, sir.
For the 100 rupees, I have to pay 10 rupees because that is 10%. Am I right?
Correct. Absolutely correct, sir.
Okay. Now what happens is that Commissioner drops 92 and confirms 8.
Yes, sir.
Now I am coming to the tribunal for 8 rupees.
Okay.
Already I paid 10. Now over and above that 10 for this 8 rupees of the total demand, have I to pay 1 point, that is 8 into 20% is 1.6. Then I'll be landing up 11.6 for my entire confirmed demand of 8 rupees. This is throwing me off beat. So I wanted to read 112.8 like this.
Yes,
Instead of reading like that, whether it will be, see, I am again a very honest confession that I am opening it only because of you. Thanks to you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, if this is, I don't think this is the right interpretation. Swaminathan is there. He is ready to with a stick because he is the king of interpretations. But anyway, I'll politely put it across. See, 112.8 B reads, a sum equal to 20% of the remaining amount of tax in dispute.
Yes, sir.
In addition to the amount paid under 1076, meaning over and above 1076, if there is going to be any amount pending, then on that I have to pay 20%.
Yes, sir.
Meaning, if it is confirmed only 8 rupees, over and above 10, there is nothing, so I need not pay.
Yes.
Can we take that way and try to interpret that over and above what my pre-deposit, anything is confirmed, and on that excess amount only I will pay 20% of it. Can that be a interpretation? Because otherwise I will end up in Sai, you can also come inside and answer me, because this is a jarring mathematics to me, that out of 8 confirmed I'll be landing up with 11.6. Rather I'll pay it and I will not file an appeal with the tribunal at all. It's just only a mathematical query. I just want anyone can be,
Yes, sir. Sir, before Sai goes ahead, my view about this is, sir, like once the demand is reduced, then naturally the order cannot be prejudiced. So my answer would be that what you're saying might probably be true. But the question here is, because the provision reads as such, as you have read, sir, 112.8 subclause B reads as a sum equal to 20% of the remaining amount of tax in dispute, in addition to the amount paid under subsection 6 of section 107. So, in addition to what we are paying under subsection 6 of section 107 is 10%. So, in addition to that, we have to pay 20% of the amount of the disputed tax. So, my understanding is we have to pay 30%. But what you're putting forward is, sir, if the demand has been reduced, then the question of order being prejudiced cannot arise, sir. So, so I think for that case, then it will not be mandatory. Like similarly, if you see, sir, because it reads as the disputed tax amount only. So when the matter does not pertain to disputed tax, then the question of mandatory pre-deposit will not arise. That is what is my understanding, sir. Subject to correction.
We'll also go to Sai and also go to the floor.
Yes, sir.
May I just supplement, sir? I completely agree with the interpretation. What Prithvi said was assuming that the demand remains the same. In case the demand reduces, then the pre-deposit paid to that extent will also have to be proportionately reduced.
Yes.
Just to give it in numericals, if suppose 100 rupees was the demand initially and I paid 10 rupees as pre-deposit. On appeal, if 100 becomes 80, I have to pay 20% of 80 over and above the 10% of 80 that I've already paid. Not 10% of 100 that I've paid. So proportionate reduction, if happening in demand, will also have to happen in pre-deposit.
That seems to be a bit logic. Anyway, I'll leave it to the floor if somebody has an answer to this. Otherwise, we'll deal with it later. But anyway, I have to thank profoundly for opening up and making me to go well beyond 100, section 100 of CGST. Thank you. Thanks one and all.
Sir, in fact, I would like to thank Muthu sir for suggesting on doing the mechanism on appeal. He was the one who suggested this topic. So
really
I think
wonderful, because nobody has touched it, and it was outcast because the tribunal has been struck down. It was
Yes,
a
sir.
completely outcast provisions. But now you brought up to light, and so many questions are coming up. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
thank you very much, sir. I would, if there is any contrary view, we would definitely like to.
Prithvi,
Yes,
Prithvi,
sir.
I have something to add.
Yes, sir.
Reading of both the provisions very clearly shows that that demanded tax has to be paid first. Pre-deposit
Yes, sir.
comes only after the demanded tax is paid.
Yes.
An order on
Yes, sir.
adjudication is passed, a demand is raised, you have to pay up the demand. After that comes the question of pre-deposit. Whether the demand is reduced or increased.
Accepted. No, Krishna, it is accepted demand only you have to pay in full.
Correct.
Admitted.
Admitted demand
you have to
only.
go on
Not
appeal.
confirmed demand.
No. Ultimately, if you go on appeal, you need an order to go on appeal.
Yeah, I have an order.
Yeah, that order is the order confirming the tax demand.
That is not admitted, na?
If you don't admit it, you again are going to file an appeal, but you have to pay that tax that is confirmed.
Not fully. That is why pre-deposit comes into play.
No. You read the provision once more, you will understand.
No. Do you mean to say that I have to pay the entire money and then only pay the appeal?
May I complete for a sec, please?
Please.
100% of the tax confirmed in the order in original, has to be paid, in addition to which the pre-deposit will come. This is my understanding of the provision.
No. I'll read it to you. I just opened the provisions. It says 8A. That is what you are referring to.
Yes.
It says unless the appellant has paid in full such part of the amount of tax, interest, fine, fee or penalty arising from the impugned order, comma, as is admitted by him.
It
So
says
only if I
arising
admit
from the
a portion of it, I have to pay in full.
Sir, in fact, my understanding is also as similar to JK sir, because the if you see 1076A for the beginning, sir, it reads that no 1076 reads that no appeal shall be filed under subsection 1 unless the appellant has paid A in full such part of the amount of tax, interest, fine, fee, and penalty arising from the impugned order as is admitted by him.
Yeah, please
So,
read it. Please read that particular provision, Justis Generum. Then you will understand that it is what has been confirmed by the adjudicating authority, and obviously you have to admit it. If you don't admit it, you go on appeal. So that 100% has to be paid as per the order and adjudication.
May
sir, for
I
example,
add to this? May I add to this? This is
yeah,
similar.
yes, ma'am.
This is similar to what we had in the sales tax provisions. If you
Exactly.
remember, we had a Form 1. Now, what is the admitted taxes? Let's assume in Form 1 we dispute a turnover of tax amount of 8 rupees, and the adjudicating authority has made a tax demand of 10 rupees. Then this 2 rupees is the admitted tax which you must show that has been paid.
Paid.
Out of this 8 rupees, you will have to pay 10 percentage, which is again 80 paise. So that is the admitted tax. Even if supposing we have not shown any turnover as our taxable turnover in our returns, but some portion of the adjudicating authority's order we accept after reading it, that portion of the amount becomes it admitted tax. Balance whatever we are putting in the form as our disputed amount is the disputed amount. So difference between the tax as shown in the balance of tax as shown in the assessment order and the disputed tax that we show in our form, that becomes.
Hello.
Thank you, Prithvi. Anyway, this is a long drawn battle. Go to the other questions, please. But nice, it is nice that you evoked so many responses. That is very wonderful.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Please go ahead with the other questions.
Yeah, thank you, JK sir, Krishnan sir, and Hema ma'am for supplementing it. Now NV Balaji sir has a question, so I'm unmuting NV Balaji sir.
Thank you. Not a question. Well presented, all three of you.
Thank you, sir.
In fact, I'm only adding to the last discussion we had. The corresponding provision under the Income Tax Act is Section 249, subsection 4, clause A, which provides, the first appeal before the commissioner could be made, subject to the assessee making payment of the admitted tax, which is pari materia with whatever was discussed till now. The example that is given is, if let me not get into the example that's given. That's the issue. But I have an issue on this. What if the assessee is not able to pay that, files an appeal, but at the time when the appeal is taken up, he pays that money? Would the appeal be still maintainable or not maintainable?
Sir, that is one moot question under GST, because it starts with the wording, no appeal shall be filed under subsection 1 unless the appellant has paid. So my understanding of this is that mandatorily to file an appeal before the appellate authority as well as before the appellate tribunal, you have to pay, because it starts with wording, no appeal shall be filed.
Yes, sir. So just to supplement what Prithvi is saying, Balaji sir, under the earlier regime under 35F, it read no appeal shall be entertained. In contrast, under GST, it says no appeal shall be filed. So under the earlier regime, what we used to do is we might, in some situations, file the appeal, say there's some difficulty in paying pre-deposit, take some condemnation from the tribunal, and at their mercy, we used to pay later. But it looks like it's not possible in GST because of the difference in wordings, where it says no appeal shall be filed and not entertained. This is my view.
Also, Sai, there used to be defect proceedings, and
Correct.
the registrar used to send a defect notice, and we had the option to cure the defect. So, but from the wordings of section 107 and 112, a precondition to filing the appeal is the payment of pre-deposit.
Yes, it looks like at least right now.
It looks like that. Exactly. I would, so before we conclude, I think I want to hear Vishwanathan sir also. Even he has few.
There is another question. From
Sorry.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Hi, Ramani this side. Wanted to add one small point on that appeal mechanism which you guys were just speaking. No appeal shall be filed vis-a-vis, no appeal shall be entertained. I think the language used in the section is because appeals under GST were all contemplated to be filed in the online mechanism and a post facto submission of the documents with the authorities. And hence, I think the wordings used were no appeal shall be filed because it is an electronic process as of now. And it continues to remain an electronic process for at least for quite a few demands as I have seen. So they have carefully and cautiously used the word no appeal shall be filed and vis-a-vis the previous wordings used in the earlier law. I had one small question now to ask. In case of a transition credit denial, which is a central tax authority passing an order stating that you're not eligible to carry forward Krishi Kalyan cess or any other cess, is it an appeal under which I should prefer under GST law under erstwhile service tax regime or erstwhile regime?
May I answer that question, Prithvi?
Yes.
So Venkat sir, it looks like it will be a GST proceeding because what you're transitioning into is based section 140 of the CGST Act. And at the end of the day, it becomes ITC under GST. So it will definitely be a GST proceeding only and not a proceeding under the earlier law. The eligibility to credit under the earlier law is not questioned, but only your transition into the present regime.
Right.
So in all probabilities, it will definitely be a GST proceeding.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Nice presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, I need to come back once more quickly. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
May Balaji.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, sir.
Sorry, because there was some small time gap between muting and unmuting, and also for me to take the book on income tax. That's why. Sorry. To continue on the same topic, the language used in income tax is no appeal under this chapter shall be admitted unless the time for filing of the appeal, etc. I would like one of you to say what is the language used under GST.
Sir, yes, the GST says no appeal shall be filed, not admitted, not entertained.
Okay. With this language, which is under the Income Tax Act, courts have taken a lenient view for some good reason. The SC is not able to pay the tax demand within the 30 days time limit for filing of the appeal, etc. Courts have taken the view so long as it is filed. The assessee before the appeal is taken up for hearing, if the amount is paid, they have directed the appellate authorities to consider the appeal on merits.
Yes, sir. I don't know if you're referring to the same decision, but there's a decision of the Supreme Court in SE Graphites.
Correct.
Where Supreme Court distinguishes between the wordings of no appeal shall be admitted versus no appeal shall be filed. They say admitted is an act subsequent to filing and therefore the appeal can be still filed without the pre-deposit. SE Graphites make this distinction.
Correct.
The decision only.
So just to add on that, I think what logic Mr. Venkat has given also makes a lot of sense because he says that the appeal, the procedure of filing appeal is all e-filing procedure only. That's why he thinks that the word no appeal shall be filed with the wisdom of the parliament, they would have written it like that. Because it is not manual filing where we can file and they return the paper with some defect memo or something. So here, even without any pre-deposit or some, the appeal might not be taken by the server itself. So that could be the reason what he says. I logically agree with him.
Thank you, NV Balaji sir, and for the question, and Prithvi and Sai for the answer. I don't find any other questions as of now.
I would like to know your views on this.
Yeah, for filing and admission, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, Prithvi, if I am right, 155 or 156 ITR.
Yes,
Supreme Court says logic has got nothing to do with law.
No, sir. Now this is not yet started. That's why
No
we are all
issues. I
using
just
our
wanted
logic.
to, since you said logic, I thought I
Yes,
should
sir.
bring
Yes, I understand that, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, proceed.
Okay. But intent of Parliament can also be the.
Sure.
That can also be applicable, sir.
Okay, I call Swaminathan sir now. Like, yes,
My
Swaminathan.
view is that, see, whether it is appeal is filed, admitted, or whatever it may be. See, if the assessee is having a problem of paying that amount, definitely courts will take a liberal view to make the payment another thing. There will not be a problem for entertaining an appeal. Otherwise, wherever if he files an appeal before the higher forum, definitely they will remand it back to the original authority, whoever it is. So to my view, that it cannot be strictly followed, that stating that no, you have to file along with the challan or whatever it may be. So there are procedures, it will be definitely entertained, because sometimes the assessee may have a problem of even making the payment. So definitely that will be condoned. That is my view. In fact, in income tax, as Balaji stated exactly, we would not be able to make the payment at the time of admission or entertaining. He will make the payment of that admitted tax, and the appeal commissioners have entertained such types of appeals also. Even before completion of the assessment, we have gone to tribunal. Sometimes tribunal has remanded the matter to the adjudicating authority to send it back, entertain the appeal on merits. So I don't find that will be a very serious problem.
Swaminathan sir, there is a material difference. See, under the Income Tax Act, after the initial time of filing appeal, there is sufficient time to condone the delay. It is not so in indirect tax. So it is the further time limit is provided. Therefore, this question is sensitive. Whether you have to file along with the admitted tax and the disputed tax within time. In fact, in sales tax, it is reported in under SCC page 1, Nawab Marakadai.
Okay.
I think Sundareswaran knows well. Even the admitted tax must have been paid within the time for filing appeal. It is not condonable. So far as indirect tax are concerned, the provisions are different. So you cannot compare the income tax provisions here. So far as civil law is concerned, all of you said what is the language used, whether no appeal shall be filed or no appeal shall be admitted.
Yes.
Strictly speaking, once the appeal is filed now, and within the due date, it must be filed in complete in all respects. You have to pay your court fee, you have to pay the admitted tax and the disputed tax also. You have to show your bona fide. Because of this reason, I was not able to pay within the such time. With the available material, I have paid. Now the court may condone the delay. So this is the position. So therefore, it's appropriate for you to file the appeal in a complete form within the due date. So that's the advisable.
In fact,
Sir,
I was also
also-
about to say that because the right is not an absolute right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is
comes with
contemplated in the statute.
conditions.
It is
It
statute.
comes with conditions as are specified in the statute.
You have to
Absolutely.
fulfill those.
Absolutely. Correct.
Now, I would like to add something. Mr. Vishwanathan had put up a query in the chat box saying that there is no assessment, everything is filed electronically. Ask him to please see the definition of section 211, which defines assessment. The Act recognizes assessment, and there can be no levy or collection without assessment. Whether it is manual or electronic makes no difference. There is assessment. So this is just for information of Mr. Vishwanathan.
Yes, yes.
No, that is self-assessment. There's no assessment by officer that I put in response to Hema Murali Krishna's referring to sales tax provisions.
No,
That's
no,
why
I'm
I put it. See, 73,
Oh, yeah.
74, what he said, demand of short paid tax, short levied tax. It's not an assessed tax that they are demanding. So if you read 79, what 78 and 79 Sindhuja was talking, there's a power for recovery within 3 months. Therefore, the right of appeal, read with that provision, probably the government want to deprive you of your right of appeal if you don't pay the admitted tax. That must be the reasons in the wordings of the appeal provision saying no appeal shall be filed if you don't pay the admitted tax. That means your right of appeal, statutory appeal is denied to you. There could be a view on that also.
No. Actually, what I read in the chat box is you said there is no assessment. Just to
No assessment means it's self-assessment, no assessment like
No,
the sales
I will read
tax,
the
sales tax. 1 minute, sales tax regime, they pass
we
an
are-
assessment order under section 27.
we are discussing
kind of
GST. We are discussing GST. Let me read the definition of assessment.
No, but
Assessment means
I replied to Hema Murli. Let Hema Murli step in now.
assessment means determination of tax liability under this Act and includes self-assessment, reassessment, provisional assessment, summary assessment, and best judgment assessment.
Correct.
So therefore, whatever
So
tax you pay is based on one of these criteria. So where is the
Correct.
question of you having no right of filing an appeal? You do
No,
have
no,
an
no.
absolute right to file an appeal.
No, you have admitted and assessed your return. So you are not aggrieved about your own assessment of what you declared in your return. What
You
is
could have made a mistake.
disputable?
But you could have made a
Disputable
mistake
tax.
while filing your return.
Huh?
You could have made a mistake while filing your return.
That
Which is
you
why
correct
the Act
it.
says you will get the money back.
That
You
is
have
a
the right to
different
get the
issue.
money
There
back.
is no demand. There is no demand there that you will get a refund. Or you would have paid by amending your return. Either you have to pay a higher tax or a lower tax. That is a dispute. That is not a dispute referred to in this particular provision. Whatever you admit, you have to pay. That is what the law says. If you have filed an assessment order, you yourself declare this is my liability. That is what the government wants you to pay.
So you yourself have said you have filed an assessment order. When you file a return by paying tax, that itself is an assessment order.
On
Exactly.
that admitted liability, the taxes must have been paid.
Correct. So, see,
Where is the question of filing appeal?
APS, admitted liability is
Yes.
self-assessment. It is
Yes,
self-assessment.
self-assessment.
You have decided that this is a tax I'm liable to pay and you pay. That is what the Act recognizes as self-assessment. Anything
Correct.
else done by an officer will be otherwise.
Yes, under 73, 74, I am saying that you can dispute. But what the law says, whatever you assessed and admitted, pay it first. In addition to that, pay 10%.
Yes.
Correct, sir. You would have already paid that amount.
That we don't know. Whether I am whether I have paid or not is not known unless you show that your paid appeal right will be given to you. That is what the law says. If you have paid right, you get the right. Right of appeal is given to you.
Correct.
Sir, the pre-deposit provisions are already upheld, sir. In telephones dispute, you have to deposit 100%. So these provisions are already upheld. We cannot say by saying that my right of appeal is vested. It is conferred by the statute. That's all.
Yes,
So if you
statutory
want to
right. That's
dispute,
what
you
I
have to
said.
pay. Yes, you have to pay.
So that is not a draconian provision according to me. When you admit something, you have to pay. That's the law.
Correct, but you said my right of appeal is taken away. It is not taken away.
No,
It
if
is
you
already
don't,
upheld, sir.
when you don't pay, it is taken
100%
away.
pre-deposit is already upheld, sir. What?
If you did not pay the admitted tax,
All the
it doesn't give you a right.
Yes, absolutely.
100 SCC page 1, 100 SCC page 1, you please see, sir, our full bench Madras High Court judgment. You have to pay the admitted tax within the due time, that is within the original time itself, and then the further condonable period.
I think that is why
the court cannot condone.
That is why it is now.
Of course, the courts have taken liberal view by saying that not admitted, not filed. Now this distinction has come, but under civil law, the appeal must be filed, completely filed in all respects. That's our High Court judgment, Justice D. Murugesan. With respect to court fee also, you have to pay in full. If there is shortfall for even 10 rupees, you have to file a petition to condone the delay in paying the deficit court fee. Our Madras High Court judgment says, if you pay a token of court fee and seek for condonation of delay, the court can refuse. So you have to say, it is the last day, I was not able to approve the sum better, I get sufficient funds. So as a token, you have paid 10 rupees. It's subject to the discretion of the court only. So therefore, you have to comply the law. There is a condition we have to comply. I think our Justice Ramsanu judgment in 5th Avenue Justice Joseph Prabhakar appeared, while upholding the pre-deposit in 35F, from which date it applies. There elaborately these points are discussed.
Sir, what N.B. Balaji sir said was in a different word used under the income tax, where the discretion was
yes, that provision cannot be compared.
discretion is available now.
Here it is
government has become wise. They want to deprive you the right of appeal if you don't pay the admitted tax. That is my view.
So in the election dispute, only 30 days, not even one day it is condonable.
Sure.
Maybe it is not welcome, but we have to look into the law like that only. As somebody said, it is not law of logic. It's law means express provision. We have to go by that.
Sure, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm reminded of this saying, sir. After all is said and done, there is more said than done. So the more and more we discuss these provisions, there are different views that are
human mind.
Yes,
And
definitely,
especially,
and
especially
that is why these
under
sessions are
GST.
very stimulating.
Yes. But whatever is said, youth people deserve kudos. You have taken yourself, done very well. Keep it up. It is good for your future. My blessings are there with three of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Before we move on to close the session, I would like to personally thank Sindhuja and Sai. I mean, it was a great time sitting and discussing on all this, and it was fun also here and there. And I would like to thank Nitin for taking up the hosting today, and even he gave me his inputs also for this session, which were also valuable. So, and of course, to all the other seniors and well-wishers, I thank you once again from the bottom of my heart, and APS sir especially for giving us this opportunity to take this session. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Prithvi. Thank you, Sai.
Thank you, Sindhuja. The conversation began way before the webinar began. So
yeah,
yes, definitely. Yes.
You guys created something which was very creative and interactive and interesting to take us through these all new provisions which are not into effect so much. And I thank you all for taking your time, and all the participants, lordships also, for attending. And you three have done a great role. Thank you. I think it's time to end the session. APS sir, I'm ending this session.
All right.
Thank you, Nitin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nitin.